Welcome to the show. I want to start with a number that honestly made me stop and reread it. MIT researchers looked at 2.7 million company founders, 2.7 million, and the average age of the most successful startup founder was not 22, it was 45.
45. Not the hoodie kid in a garage. Not the genius college dropout everybody likes to parade around. 45 years old, across a study big enough that you can't wave it off as a cute little anomaly.
And I think that's the part that lands for our audience. 2.7 million is not a blog post. That's not one flashy founder we all heard about. That's a massive sample asking who actually builds companies that grow, hire people, and last.
Right, and the answer is inconvenient if you've spent years being told business belongs to the very young. The reality is, a founder who's 50 has roughly twice the chance of building a top growth company compared with a founder who's 30. Twice the chance. That's the fact people ought to write on the wall.
Okay, so let me push on that, because somebody listening is going to say, fine, but don't younger people have more energy, more time, more willingness to take risks? That is the usual story.
Energy is nice. Time is nice. Risk tolerance is nice. None of those things rescue you from bad judgment. Business success is not mainly about having a bright idea. Ideas are cheap. The expensive part is knowing what not to do. Which customer will drain your life? Which opportunity looks shiny and pays nothing? Which clause buried in a contract is the one that'll come back and bite you?
That line, knowing what not to do, I think that's the whole thing. Because when you've been around a while, you don't just know the textbook answer, you know the trapdoors.
Exactly. You know the warning signs. You know when somebody's asking for too much before they paid for anything. You know when a market is real and when it's just noise. You know that one little detail everybody wants to skip because it's boring, and that boring detail is the difference between profit and pain.
And that's a comforting reframe, especially for people over 45 who feel like they missed the boat. Because the culture tells you if you didn't start at 22, somehow you're late.
No, you may be later than the myth. You're not later than reality. Reality says experience compounds. Reality says having seen markets change, people change, tools change. That matters. I've watched business reinvent itself over and over. The people who survive are not always the fastest. Usually they're the ones who can spot nonsense early.
Spot nonsense early should probably be a module all by itself.
I'd teach that one all day. But seriously, this is why the age myth does real damage. It talks experienced people out of even trying. They assume the internet belongs to the young, AI belongs to the technical, and online business belongs to trend chasers. Meanwhile, the numbers are quietly saying something else. The people with the strongest odds are often the people who have been in the world long enough to understand consequences.
So the myth is young genius. The data is 45. And the practical meaning is that maturity is not some consolation prize. It's part of the advantage.
That's it. If you're 45, 50, 60, 70, you're not trying to compensate for your age. You're supposed to use it. The scar tissue is useful. The mistakes are useful. The pattern recognition is useful. That's not baggage, that's inventory.
And that leads straight into my favorite kind of fact, the one that's a little insulting to the internet. Udemy data shows the highest earning instructors average 47 years old. 47, not 27, not fresh out of college with a ring light and a slogan.
47 is beautiful. And it gets better. The profitable course categories are not the sexy ones people brag about at dinner parties. They're practical niches: project management, safety certifications, accounting software, HR compliance.
Project management, safety certifications, HR compliance. I want to underline those because they're so unglamorous people might miss the point. These are exactly the kinds of subjects someone might say, well, nobody would want to learn that from me. And apparently, yes, they would.
They absolutely would, because boring usually means useful. It means people have real problems and want real answers. If you spent 25 years doing project management, you know things a beginner would love to learn in 6 weeks instead of 6 years. Same with safety. Same with accounting software. Same with HR compliance. Those aren't flashy topics. They're valuable topics.
So let me try to say it back. Boring doesn't mean low value. It means fewer people are pretending to be experts in it.
Exactly. Less hype, more substance. The practical knowledge is scarcer, and scarce knowledge is worth money.
That connects to another number I wish more people knew, the expert gap. When people have 10 or more years of real experience, they tend to underestimate their own knowledge by about 40% compared with how beginners see them. 40%. That's not a small little confidence wobble.
There it is. 40% is the number. People who've done the work for years assume what they know is ordinary because they live inside it every day. They forget what it felt like not to know it.
And beginners don't forget. Beginners are looking at that same person thinking, you know so much more than I do. So the expert thinks, oh, this is common sense. And the beginner thinks, please explain literally all of that.
That's exactly right. I do this myself. Somebody asks me about sales, marketing, building an offer, following up, handling objections, and my first instinct is to say, well, that's just basic. No, it isn't basic. It's only basic to me because I got it wrong, corrected it, got it wrong again, paid for the mistake, then learned it properly.
Paid for the mistake is the phrase that sticks, because that's the personal angle people skip. Trial and error isn't just a sad little detour, it's what makes the knowledge teachable. If you made expensive mistakes, you can help somebody else avoid expensive mistakes.
Yes, that is why your experience has market value. Not because you read about it, because you lived it. You know what fails in real conditions. You know what sounds good and collapses. You know where people hesitate, where they waste time, where they overspend, where they misunderstand the process. That is what teaching really is, shortening somebody else's learning curve.
And I think that's reassuring for listeners who feel ordinary. You may feel ordinary because you've carried this knowledge for 15 or 20 years. But 15 or 20 years is exactly what makes it useful to someone who is just starting.
Right. The people who should be teaching often talk themselves out of it. Who am I to teach this? You're the person with the 10 years, or the 25, or the 40. That's who you are. And if your field feels practical, plain, unglamorous, good. Practical problems create paying customers. Now here's where this gets really interesting. Adults over 55 are the fastest growing segment of new online course creators right now. Not the biggest segment, the fastest growing. That's a very different statement.
Fastest growing over 55. I think people need to hear that exact phrase because it means this isn't some one-off story. More people in that age group are stepping in every year.
And for a simple reason, the tools finally caught up. The knowledge was already there. The expertise was already there. What changed is that now you can package it, write it, organize it, market it, even create the assets around it without needing a whole technical team.
This is where your own story matters, because you are not saying that from theory. You spent years trying to build an education business before AI made it workable.
I did. 10 years trying to build it, if we're being honest. Websites people didn't visit, courses people didn't buy, a lot of effort, not enough traction. And then AI shows up. Suddenly I can do the things that used to require technical skill I never had. I'm 78. I have dyslexia. I have ADHD. I do not come from a technical background. And still, this is the point where it finally became possible for me to build what I'd been trying to build all along.
78 is the detail I want people to sit with, not 48. 78. Because somebody listening at 56 or 63 or 71 may still be carrying this belief that tech has passed them by.
Tech doesn't have to pass you by if the tools are finally simple enough to serve you. That's the shift. AI can do the heavy lifting that used to block experienced people from getting into the game. So now the bottleneck isn't wisdom. It isn't credibility. It isn't life experience. The bottleneck is usually just deciding to begin.
And then you get to that last proof point, which is such a clean way to think about compounding. Warren Buffett accumulated 99% of his net worth after age 50. 99%.
99% after 50. That's the part people misunderstand about compounding. They think it slows down because they're older. Often it accelerates because the base is bigger. More experience, better judgment, more clarity, stronger pattern recognition. The curve bends later.
So if we put all three chapters together, The message is not, don't worry, you're still allowed to participate. It's stronger than that. It's that later life can actually be the season when the return on experience starts showing up.
That's exactly it. You spent decades building wisdom. The mistake would be leaving it on the table now, just when the tools exist to turn it into income. If you've been sitting on real expertise and you want help figuring out what it's worth and how to package it, start your free 7-day trial at school.com/thewisdomadvantage.
Inside, you'll find the full course, the resource library, weekly live support, and a community of entrepreneurs 45 plus who are doing this in real time. Start your free 7-day trial at school.com/thewisdomadvantage.
Don't talk yourself out of your own value.
We'll see you next time.